based on Eric's watch, my watch, it's 9:30. Based on the clock on the wall, we're already behind schedule, so we better go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for coming to this meeting of the Utah Lake Commission Technical Committee. We appreciate your participation greatly. And to get started, I think we'll just go around the room and have each person introduce themselves. There's some new faces around the table, like we always seem to have. And just emphasize everybody is always welcome. So thanks again for being here. My name is Michael Mills. I'm with the June Sucker Recovery Implementation Program. Go ahead, Dee.
Dee Chamberlain of the Saratoga Spring Owners Association.
Sarah Johnson, Central Utah Water.
Jason Allen Sticker.
I'm Theron Miller, Jordan River Farmington Bay Water Quality Council.
David Richards, Oreo Helix Consulting. I'm working on the topic for the next few years.
Matt Randall, I'm a BYU graduate student working on Utah Lake.
Bryce Jackson, West Passport City.
Scott Daly with the Division of Water Quality, stepping in as the state's basin coordinator, taking over the position that Hillary Arns served in this committee.
Karen Knighton, planner with Saratoga Springs.
Henry Maddox, South Carolina. Lee Hanson, representing the Utah Council.
Richard Nelson, Utah County Public Works. Franklin City. Scott Bird.
Doug Starbucks, Division of First Friends.
Right back from Port City.
Chris Keller,
Eric Ellis, Utah Luke Allen, Utah Lake Commission.
And then
Rich Mickelson from Provo City.
welcome, Rich. And our esteemed vice chair has joined us. You want to introduce yourself, Reed? Okay.
I'm Reed Price, representing Orem on the technical committee.
And
Mark Ogren with Provo City, the Water Reclamation.
great. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
Again, we welcome everyone. Thank you again for being here. We have two items of business. We need to approve minutes from our past meetings. We met in March and also in April. No, we only met in March. Correct?
Right. But we also had our, so the March meeting was not official, we didn't have a quorum, so we were approving those minutes.
And then we need to approve the minutes from January because we weren't able to approve them in March because we didn't have a quorum. That's correct. So those were both distributed with the meeting agenda. If you remember, the March meeting was out under the pavilion. So,
It was nice and toasty.
yeah.
I have a quick question. If we have a meeting that doesn't have a quorum, do we still record the minutes and then approve them at a later meeting? Do we make those meetings official even though it wasn't an official quorum?
I would
We took
recommend
minutes.
still doing minutes, but you can't take any official action.
We couldn't take an official action, but we would take the minutes and make the minutes official.
You could argue that the technical committee doesn't make any official action. So the only official action is approving minutes.
Okay.
That stands. Otherwise, we're just a recommending body to the board. So I would recommend always doing that so that we have an official record of what was discussed, so that in the future we can just look and see that we addressed this topic way back when.
So let's start with the January meeting minutes. Were there any comments on that?
On item number 3, talk about the technical committee appointment. Talk about Reed being nominated and voted in as the new vice chair.
Did you want to change that?
No, I don't think we need to make a note in there that Mike was the current vice chair and moved into the chair position.
Yeah.
As part of that.
You got that, Ruth?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And then we cleaned up the next set of minutes that inadvertently titled you as chairman. So
Yeah, you moved up.
Yeah, let's not jump the gun.
you know, we've adjusted that on our official copy, but let it be known that we've made that adjustment that he's the vice chairman, not the chairman. For Reed Price.
Any other comments on those January minutes? Okay, seeing none, we would entertain motions to approve those minutes.
with that change, I'll make a motion to approve the January 20th minutes.
So Richard's made the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Reed second. All right. Any opposed to the approval of the meeting minutes from January? Okay, we will consider those approved. Move on to March. I wasn't there at the March meeting. I was in Toasty, St. George. So, but any comments on the March meeting minutes? I know there was a limited group. Okay. Seeing none, does anybody have a motion to approve those March minutes?
I'll move to approve them.
Avery Price has made the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. And then any opposed to the approval of those minutes? We'll consider those approved, and thank you for allowing us to get through what is hopefully the most painful part of our meeting today. Okay. We already did introductions, so we'll go ahead and move on to item number 4. Just some brief updates on different Utah Lake issues. And it looks like you're first up, Jason, talking about Utah Lake levels.
Okay, we are what is considered 4.5 feet below the compromise level, and that translates into 3 to 4 feet in each marina, which means that visitation has dropped, and I'm getting reports of prop damage and other such unpleasantries from what visitors we are getting. So I don't know how to sugarcoat that and make that sound rosy and sweet, but it is what it is. And according to the projections I got from Jared from the Central Utah Water Conservancy Districts, we're looking at the same type of year that we had back in '04, which translated into having a foot or two and people pushing their boats out of the marina to get out to deeper water by August. If the Water Conservancy District can say I'm totally wrong and everything will be peachy keen, then that would be wonderful to hear. But she's not saying anything, so I'm guessing that's probably just the way it stands.
I don't see any clouds out there.
No. So it is what it is, and we'll make do with what water we got. We are still getting a handful of visitors, and yeah, seem to be going out and getting themselves into trouble.
Are there any of them having prop damage in the harbors?
I've had a few reports of that, yes. But a lot of it seems to be hitting random obstacles out on the lake. Most of them have learned what to do inside the marinas.
There's a few obstacles in the
Oh yeah.
marina, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we've done our best to mark them, but they still exist. It's not an exact science as far as marking buoys. People don't even read the buoys when you do place them, so they do as they please. So.
Right. Any questions for Jason on lake levels? Okay, moving forward.
Oh, by the way, I'm sorry, just on a side note, I received a phone call and we were able to discover where all the water's going. Apparently the NSA is taking all the water for their supercomputers, and that's why Utah Lake is draining. So I had a half an hour conversation with an individual who believes that the federal government is taking all the water to the point of the mountain. It's a conspiracy. It is. So he claims that he'll be getting Gephardt to get that resolved. So hopefully the water level itself will be resolved by Gephardt.
Is that for cooling water, or what do you do?
It's cooling water for
Is there supercomputers
for
that
the
just when it's so
computer.
hot?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So nothing better than Utah Lake water to roll down a $5 billion computer. Sorry.
That's pretty good.
Okay. Moving forward to Phragmites treatment. Eric, you want to take that?
Yeah, so this year, we might have mentioned that the WRI approved the funding that we requested this year, so we will be able to do Phragmites treatment in Provo Bay, and then from kind of north of the park here up through Powell Slough, for a combined just under 2,300 acres, and then 450 more acres of spot treatments around the lake on previous treated areas where there's some regrowth taking place. We're super excited about that. We're going to Army Corps on getting mitigation credits for the restoration that's happening this year. The county has done a really good job of tracking the successful treatments that have been done over the last few years. And so it should be fun. We'll work with Mike on going through that process. The county is helping out with that to kind of spearhead that effort, as they're a major contributor in most of the work on that, on the ground. But we'll be pursuing that over the next few months to get that all worked out.
What kind of credit ratio are you gonna give them, Mike?
It's going to be
One to one, right?
very site specific. We'll have to talk.
application, yes.
Yeah, we'll have to talk.
And who's gonna be the caretaker or the holder of those credits?
Probably the county.
That'll probably be forestry.
Okay.
That's on their land. Sorry.
Will those credits be available to commission members for mitigation purposes? Since
We're early in the process, but we'll figure out how to work with those so that it allows specific type of kind of recreation type projects to move ahead. Not so much for development,
roadways,
but for
Yeah.
recreation.
I want to have it for development of homes or commercial, anything like that, but lake-related project.
good, yeah, I think that's good. I would hope that, and I would expect Forestry Farm State Lands to be cooperative as projects come forward and wetlands are mitigated to that intent. So whatever commission member needs them.
Yeah, we're hoping that it helps kind of stimulate some good activities down here with the lake that we can be excited about.
Okay.
That process, is that strictly just an herbicide, or is it a combination of burning herbicide?
It's a combination of chemical treatment and then ground squishing and monitoring to make sure that not only are we getting rid of the Phragmites, but that we also are seeing native vegetation regrowing back in those areas. So it's a multi-step process that for the last few years has been really well documented. So you can see that it's actually doing a really good job of restoring the shorelines to what they were before the Phragmites came and invaded and took over.
Is the work there that you guys offered 4 years ago?
Yeah, we participated in it.
It's the same thing you did for you guys.
It's not a set it, get it done and forget it type of operation.
Process.
Got it.
Just like our own yards.
Any questions or comments about Phragmites removal? Okay. Moving forward to carp removal, just an update. This year didn't start off the best, very similar conditions to what we had last year, with January and February not being the most productive. Things picked up in March, and then for the past 2 months, carp removal has actually been great in terms of the number of pounds removed. Since we started doing this in 2009, we had our most amount removed during the month of April ever, and then again during the month of May, set another record for removal during the month of May. Typically, April and May are some of the worst months for carp removal because the fish are more scattered, a little more difficult to target them, but the lake level has definitely played a role. And so since we started in 2009, we're up to 21.8 million pounds removed. If you look just solely at 2016, we've removed 934,000 pounds. So that's a little bit behind of where we would like to be, because it's just about the same as where we were at this point last year. So, and like I've been telling everybody, really what makes or breaks our year comes down to the fall season. From September until the lake ices up is really when the bulk of the carp are removed. So it's difficult to say whether it's going to be a good year or a bad year until you really get into that time frame. And then this kind of ties into the next agenda item, but we have funded a reassessment of the carp population in Utah Lake. The original studies that were done evaluating the carp population were all done about 10 years ago. We're dealing with a very different population now, lower in number, different in size of individuals. And so we funded a study through Utah State University. They've been on the ground and active for a few months now in terms of evaluating what our current population is, what's its ability to rebound from its current population status, maybe even identifying some management techniques going forward to maintain a reduced population out there. So it involves a lot of aging of fish, isotope studies, that type of work. And that's all been funded through the June Sucker Recovery Program.
Is it a one-year study?
We'll get the results back on this 1 year and probably make a determination at that point what our next steps are going forward, whether it will become a multi-year study or not. But right now, it's only funded for 1 year.
And that'll produce some good results for us, we hope.
Right. I think we just lost Jason as he rides off into the sunset.
He's just showing off.
Someone's,
Wait with his own.
Well, they got red and blue lights.
Yeah.
Mike, is there any, what anecdotal evidence is out there that suggests that the ecosystem is changing?
I don't have anything new for this year yet. Last year, there were more reports of vegetation out there in the lake, submerged aquatic vegetation, particularly right inside the mouth of Provo Bay. This year, we may get to the point where that's dry, which is great. But that's been probably our biggest evidence of a change. And then there's been a small increase in Secchi depth that we've measured through different projects in terms of monitoring out there.
How about bycatch? Number, size?
Not really much of a change. There seems to be more white bass this year, but to be able to tie that to carp removal, I don't think you could. Probably not anything in terms of bycatch to indicate where that change is happening. But our nets are placed where we're hoping to catch carp, so that's their goal.
Does Bill say that it's getting harder?
That's what he was saying up until April, and then things really picked up, and most of his fishing in April and May was right in Provo Bay, and the water level was just about perfect in terms of isolating carp to where they couldn't escape into the reeds. So it works really well for him.
Are the fish, I know he concentrates Provo Bay, Goshen Bay, Spanish Fork River areas. Do they spread out, or do they, meaning, are there higher densities on the north end, or do they eventually, like a mixture, just eventually spread out?
This time of year, I think they're pretty well spread out and distributed probably lake-wide. The reason the fall is more successful is that's when they get more concentrated. That's when it's a lot easier to catch more fish. And they do concentrate more in those areas that you mentioned, especially Goshen Bay. But this time of year, I think they're very widely distributed.
We were down in Goshen Bay 2 weeks ago, and carp spawning they were out of control. They were splashing everywhere. There's millions of them down there, splashing around.
And that's something you can see lake-wide. It's
Yeah.
shallow, and the outer marina here.
And just another thing, we're going to be sampling benthic macroinvertebrates throughout the next couple of years, so we might be able to see some kind of changes in the benthic community and maybe the zooplankton community as well. Try to tie that into carp removal.
Some people get to have all the fun, huh?
Looking at bugs.
There's been a lot of spawning activity in Saratoga Bay off our shores, a lot, the last few weeks. Still going on.
So a study like that, what are we hoping? What's good news?
Well, what we're looking at is to see what kind of changes are in the benthic macroinvertebrates and zooplankton, and just over time, what's happening, just to see what the condition is, right? There's not been much baseline data collected yet on benthos, because the carp are obviously down there eating the midges and the scuds and the things like that. And so we want to see if there's any kind of changes going on down there. So that would be a real big benefit.
And what would be a positive change, I guess is my question.
Would increased biomass, right? For example, increased biomass would indicate that maybe carp aren't eating as much. Change in the community structure of the bugs, right? Increase in other species that you didn't typically find out there, things like that.
Are you including macrophytes as part of that? Assessing the changes in macrophyte?
No, that'd be fun. That'd be certainly Provo Bay. That's someone definitely needs to go out there and monitor the change in macrophytes and submerged aquatic vegetation.
I was just thinking as macrophyte communities change, I mean, there's habitat for macrophytes.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good change.
And we're sampling in Provo Bay, Goshen Bay, and then out in Utah Lake proper.
So we also have seen more, like we were sampling the north side yesterday, and we came down as far down as Powell Slough, but there's a big patch of, shallow water now opens on out of the water in another, 2 months from now, but there's some pretty clear water with several noticeable patches of SAV going on, but we didn't see last year. So I think, there is some support for this idea that at least there's some areas that seem to be improving, but we could use somebody to do some macrophyte, SAV survey just to see if that's real and quantify if that's really occurring. That would be a huge benefit for this whole thing, I think.
Submerged aquatic vegetation?
Yeah, submerged aquatic vegetation. The Potamogeton, the sago pondweed, that kind of stuff, which is both good duck food as well as great habitat for additional tier of macroinvertebrates that would live in that aquatic forest, as well as juvenile fish and everything else, it's all good stuff. So, yeah.
We'd love to talk about methods. We've tried to use a side scan sonar method to try to monitor submerged aquatic vegetation, but it hasn't been effective given our lake levels. We haven't been able to use it in the areas where we would
exactly. I see that. Yeah.
To see the change. So.
And this was, well, Provo Bay is a little deeper now. It's maybe 2 feet deep now, but this one beach area, it was extraordinarily clear, even on a windy day yesterday. That last 100 meters out from the shoreline was like crystal clear, and there's this, just individual patches of SAV were developing, and that's really cool. But I just hope it's not out of the water, in another couple of months we lose it again.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Mike, what is the status on the, on the idea of doing a count or getting the sense of what the numbers are of
we funded our ongoing annual carp monitoring. That will occur in August again. And we track density, like I've mentioned before, kilograms per hectare. We'll do that again. This study we funded through Utah State is a more in-depth look at maybe some of the different population parameters of the current carp population to compare back to our original studies back in the early 2000s.
So will either of those pick up any numbers on other fish in the lake to see what the proportionality is of carp to the overall population?
They may. That's not what the studies are designed to do, so it can kind of be like a side item, and anytime you get that, you always get some criticism that if you used a different method, better designed to evaluate the entire community, you would get better numbers. But it's definitely carp focused.
What's happening with the density numbers, carp density?
They're decreasing, especially if you look back at our original numbers. Decreasing in the terms of biomass, not, if you look at numbers, individual carp, there's a large decrease, but if all your individual carp are now 3 times the original size, you probably haven't accomplished much. So we really focus on, rather than numbers per acre, biomass per acre, and that's decreased also.
Do you know if the Lake Elsinore project is still deemed successful?
They've, given their drought situation down there, they've actually moved to an aeration program because they just have so little water right now. They're at a point where they could probably have a dry lake if things don't change for them. But in terms of carp, they don't have a carp problem right now. My sense is that they're disappointed that they've had to go to the mechanical aeration because they were hoping that the carp removal project would take care of everything. But it's more a function of lake level than anything else at this point for them.
What are they aerating for?
Just
To
to
keep oxygen in the water?
Right.
Keep the current blood.
Yeah. How are they doing that?
It's a series of pumps, basically.
Just move the water around?
Well, it's pumping air into
so
the
it's
water column.
membrane filters, some sort of a aeration.
Yeah, I don't know exactly. Yeah.
Is this the lake that they dropped their carp population to 75% and then it crashed? Their population?
They never gave us numbers like that. They started out paying their commercial fishermen a similar rate like we were at, and then got to the point where they had to quadruple that in order to make it profitable for the commercial fishermen to catch enough carp. Because it got enough of it. And then got to a point where they weren't even catching enough to have any interest.
Okay, can I add one more thing? I moved up here from Moab to Orem this last week, primarily to do my research on the native mussels and mollusks of Utah Lake. There used to be 17 species of mollusks, freshwater mollusks here, and I'm trying to find out why they disappeared. And we're also monitoring the freshwater mussel of Anadonta in the lake for water quality purposes. So that's my main focus would be to work on those native mussels and mollusks of Utah Lake. So we'll keep you guys informed of what we find.
Appreciate that. Our discussion for the last several minutes here is really tied into agenda item 4D, current and proposed research on Utah Lake. Eric attended a meeting of the group that Theron's with, the Farmington Bay, I forget all the water bodies, yeah, the Water Quality Council up there, and got some feedback about potential research ideas for here on Utah Lake. Utah Lake's gone through several periods of activity dating all the way back to the 1970s in terms of a lot of research. Lee Hansen was probably involved in back at that time. LaVere Merritt. At one point, BYU had a research station on the south side of the river here. So it's kind of ebbed and flowed over the last several years. The June Sucker program has been very active in funding research on the lake, of course. Most of their projects are June Sucker centric and really aimed at trying to identify whether recovery actions are being beneficial. But over the years, we've funded Utah Lake food web models, Utah Lake circulation model, a few things that kind of span beyond the June Sucker recovery realm. But Eric was hoping to have some discussion today about future research, research ideas, and Oreo Helix and Theron Miller. You guys have become very active just in the last year or so and very involved. And really the impetus for most of this has been Water Quality's unveiling or rolling out of Utah Lake Water Quality Modeling Project. And did you want to elaborate at all, Eric, on what you see the future being or anything like that?
No, more just opening for discussion ideas on some either just research or also projects that we might look at to test some of the current water quality products out there on the lake. We've had multiple calls from people that have filter systems and things like that might be implemented when we have a bloom or things of that nature. It would be fun to, you guys know more about it than anyone, get some ideas and then we can look to find funding partners to try to test some of these things out so that we can find more than one solution for bringing the lake into water quality specs that the state's looking at instead of just targeting one particular group or another. There must be some solutions out there, or at least we should explore those that exist.
Yeah, and one of the issues that we've run into, David alluded to it earlier, with the lack of some baseline information. And the June Sucker program has funded an ecosystem monitoring project for over 10 years. It's mostly just been monthly samples out here, and gives you an idea of how zooplankton communities change within the course of a year, but it's not as intensive, or it's also a very large lake. So us going out and taking 9 samples throughout the entire lake don't necessarily capture the entire picture of what's going on. And so it seems like that's continually one of the questions or criticisms about a lot of Utah Lake research, is a general lack for solid baseline data to compare to the current condition. And with our limited funding, we've tried to address some of that, but never in as an intense manner as some people would probably like to see. Our ecosystem monitoring project has zooplankton data, some macroinvertebrate data, Secchi depth, which kind of a cursory measurement, but it's something. I guess we would just kind of open the floor to other questions or comments about future research or direction.
Probably the biggest issue here, we're not looking for, oh, it sure would be nice to know this, but what are the economic impacts of decisions that are being made at the lake? The Utah Lake Commission is in a unique situation in that it can and should act as a kind of a mediator between two primarily competing interests, that being the State Division of Water Quality and the municipalities, both of whom think their viewpoint is the most correct, and one may be more correct than the other, but the Utah Lake Commission has the, I feel, obligation to help mediate between the two competing interests to do what's best for the lake and balance that with the economic impact and the benefits that can come from any potential improvements. And so I know when I was in Eric's position, it was the Jordan River, Farmington Bay, Utah Lake Water Quality Council. They want to make sure that they are heard, and that they have geared up to do a lot of research to hopefully show, from their viewpoint, that there is no need for, or that the economic impact compared to the benefits to water quality is not as good as others would want. And the state, of course, has the obligation to, the DWQ has the obligation to monitor or to set regulations for particular types of water quality, but at what cost. So most of the comments, I assume, will come from the municipality or from the Jordan River, Farmington Bay, Utah Lake Water Quality Council group that knows where it's going, and also from DWQ. But that doesn't mean that no one else is. I would encourage all to be involved in this process and to support doing what's best for the lake under certain parameters.
What do you mean by what's best for the lake?
But what's best for the lake, water quality wise, to ensure that it's a clean water body and appropriate for its characteristics.
What's achievable.
It's different, what's achievable, and also what are the costs. Once that's determined, what are the costs to get there? We don't want to spend money unnecessarily to have a very small benefit to the lake. My personal feeling, and I believe that's the feeling of the municipalities. DWQ recognizes that the economic portion of that is important, but they aren't as they're not as conservative as the municipalities take on.
So, for example, what research is being done right now to get a clear understanding of the differentiation between point source, nutrient loading, and what's being carried down from our streams and rivers naturally. You know, something that isn't being loaded from agriculture, stormwater, or wastewater treatment facilities, but that is just being nutrient that comes from.
So I see two groups. I see two groups doing research right now: the June Sucker Recovery Program and the Jordan River Group.
And Division of Water Quality.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah, I think the work plan that we rolled out last fall, work element 4, is targeted specifically at that question of figuring out how those loads balance out from all the different sources. You know, through various data, I think right now what we propose to do is to estimate those loads from all the point sources and then try to get at the loading coming in from the tributaries, and then some of Darren's work they have ongoing now to be looking at some of those direct drainages that we don't have as good a data set on. And then as we move into the further phase of the study, it might include more watershed type modeling where you can get into more specific loading estimates from some of those areas, different sources, agricultural drainage, municipal urban runoff, what future waste loads would look like, given upgrades that have happened in wastewater community already, and things that are planned to go online in the next little while. So I think that's all wrapped in work element 4 of what we're trying to.
So June Sucker's focusing primarily on carp removal and so to allow hopefully the water quality to improve based on that. Theron's group is doing your mollusk studies and others, and DWQ has the work plan that's in place. I know that one thing that when you hear things like we don't have enough data for it, I think that the mayors and much of the board of the Utah Lake Commission thinks, well, let's not make an important financial decision if we don't have enough data. So we need to continue to gather that data according to the plan, I would assume, and then to have it verified and critiqued by other groups. So I guess the ultimate question is what we're doing carp counts, and Darren, what are you guys focused on?
Yeah, I just try to give you a quick summary of, and I think I addressed this group, maybe 6 months ago, and it hasn't changed much since then, but we have issued a new contract last year with Greg Carling, and that's Matt's supervisor. He's a BYU professor. So I might say, we have 2 basic issues that we're pursuing, and both of them are concerned with the phosphorus issue. So one is, and there could be different, one is the speciation of phosphorus as it's released out of our POTWs or even out of the tributaries. And, the big question that LeBear's raised and Lee Hansen's raised for a long time is that, there's a strong belief, and now we have some evidence for it, and we're not going to say anything yet as far as certainty goes, but there is evidence that a large portion of that phosphorus is tied up in an inorganic mineral form or several mineral forms, and we just don't know. This is what the focus of Matt's research is. But the overall idea is that, and basic chemistry is that, our POTWs have a pH of about 7.4, 7.5 in the discharges in Utah Lake. Yesterday it's at like pH 8.5, and just really a high pH and a lot higher alkalinity, a lot higher carbonate, so there's a lot more potential for mineralization to form, and some of those minerals wind up phosphorus in the mineral, like hydroxyapatite is one that people know about that are in this business, but it could be huge. It could be anywhere from, I'm going to guess, from 50% to maybe 80% or more, just on a hypothetical scale. And LeBear thinks it's at the higher end of that scale. That, so what that tells us is that, if the lake has a natural attenuation of phosphorus, and by the way, this is not like it's an iron phosphorus complex. That's not redox. This stuff is a mineral. It's a pH dependent mineral that takes a pH of around 4.0 to redissolve this stuff, because it's a carbonate base. So that you'll never see a pH of 4 in Utah Lake, So these things we think are going to be really permanent, and we do have high, even the Mishko well stuff There's a lot of phosphorus in the sediments now. And a lot of it gets resuspended back in the water column, so we're doing total and dissolved phosphorus. But that's sort of the question I think that we're getting at for the municipalities is, it's going to be expensive to take phosphorus out. And so to go there, we want to make sure we understand what the bang for the buck is. What are we going to get for our money that we spend on this? And that's really the root of the issue for the municipalities here. So we're trying to say, well, if say 75% of it's going to be bound up anyway, then you go, okay, so 25% of that is now biologically available compared to the total amount of phosphorus. And so, then you go, okay, if I removed half of that, then okay, I've removed another, 12.5%, whatever. So it's economy of scale and the scale of effectiveness, and that's what we're concerned about. So we just want to let everyone understand what we get when we do a phosphorus removal program. Do we get that thing for the buck that we would likely, everybody else in most of the country thinks that we're going to get this one-for-one reduction. Well, we may not. We may get a small percentage of that reduction compared to what, for example, other municipalities around the country have, because this is such a unique chemistry.
So Darren, when you're researching this question, what tests are you doing, and at what point will you have your group have a conclusion that can be vetted by others?
Well, like I say, that the question is how much of it is going to be permanently buried in the sediments. Or rendered in. Even if it's resuspended, it might go down Jordan River. But still, the question is how much of it is available. So, if you just compare this to normal limnological parameters like the TSI, Carlson's TSI, for example, we should have a whole lot more algae bloom out there, like double what we have. But for things like light attenuation and probably phosphorus speciation, it's not biologically available, nor is reaching this potential because the Secchi depth yesterday was 14, So now it's probably from the big wind that's been going on the last couple of days, but, those sort of things, But I'm saying the next 3 years or so, it's a PhD program at least that we're talking about here. But this is the central focus of this contract to Greg Curry and the BYU, and Matt's doing the actual field work and research on that. He's got some wonderful electron micrographs to show that there is hydroxyapatite, for example, is being formed. We don't know what else is being formed as well. We're just beginning this thing, but we've got a laboratory and the wherewithal to do this. I'm very optimistic about this, so I'm going to say a few years we'll have this answer. Okay.
Can I just add?
Sure.
So some of the stuff, the major questions that I'm trying to answer are, where is phosphorus going from the water into the sediment, and how mobile is it after it goes into the sediment? And so far I've found, just from preliminary results, that I've spiked water with upwards of 300 milligrams per liter of phosphorus, which is like 300 times or more what's in the lake. And the sediment is still taking up phosphorus, so it's not saturated yet. And I'm still figuring out things, but we have a long way to go. But so far, it's looking like it can take up a lot of phosphorus.
Do you determine the rate at which it does that?
That's one thing to come. I'm only a year in so far. But
that's what's fun about this research. It's just brand new stuff. Worldwide, this chemistry is not very well understood. It's been described in the laboratories, but this is pretty cool, new high-tech chemistry that we're doing here.
One thing that's really important about the research that this group is doing is it's going to be tied into the models that DWQ is doing with the University of Utah. So we're going to have different components that will be tied into all these models that are going to make a huge basin-wide model of Utah Lake and different drainage.
Well, and I hope that modeling effort comes full circle back to your original question of, well, what is the benefit of actually removing certain amounts of nutrients?
Right.
If we remove 100% of wastewater inflows, does it actually make a difference in the amount of algae we grow and their ability to meet beneficial uses in the lake? We should be able to answer what that benefit is with that model.
And then also, how will that tie into the food web and affect June suckers and carp? Right, so just take it all
we want to link it all together if we can finesse this, as scientists, how to put. There's a huge amount of effort for June sucker there. Now that we know there's this contract that Star Grant, whatever from EPA that the U of U got. Just talking to Scott about it earlier, that it's like a $1.4 million grant, and that's looking at similar things. watershed issues, if it's point, non-point source, some of the stuff that Matt's working on with, you know, what's the final fate, what's the transport, what's the bioavailability of this stuff. So, you know, there's a lot of people that have a lot of interest in, and especially the U of U grant, they're going to throw a lot of brain power. They're talking about a postdoc and 2 or 3 more graduate students and 3 full professor PIs. There's going to be a lot of brain power thrown at this thing in the next few years. So this is an exciting time. It's a really exciting time to get at this question.
U of U, I'm not sure how public that's supposed to be right now.
We're just going to get in there and be part of
with
it.
U of U because they made a proposal to the EPA for a very similar effort that has a lot of overlap. And really their main goal is to assess what long-term climate change, the impacts of eutrophication on Utah Lake, and then the entire Jordan River Basin.
This is in lieu of the water modeling that DWQ is doing?
Well, it was proposed separately, but they had made a pitch in their proposal to EPA to be able to cover the realm of TMDL or TMDL-like studies, what we're all engaged in right now. And so we're trying to figure out how our process integrates with their process. And our view is that we don't need competing pathways, you know, in developing multiple models, and that we could all come together with combined effort to produce a product that's good for everybody at the table. But that's, you know, we're just barely working through that. The grant, I don't know if it's even been authorized from the EPA yet.
Right.
Our Region 8 counterparts are trying to, it's a completely different office, so they're trying to develop an MOU between the 2 EPA offices and then the U of U to be able to integrate our process into it. So hopefully we'll know more about that in the coming months. I think some folks here and there, and we have that modeling technical group that we've been working on, going through the model selection. Had a number of different models that we were looking at to be able to simulate the lake, and they essentially came up with the same model linkages that we had proposed already. So we're hoping to integrate that model technical group in with the U of U in the coming months.
Yeah.
So is your modeler on hold for now?
Yes. Yeah.
So
We're still working through, we had obligated to put the final touches on the model selection document, and we're doing that right now. We're pretty close. But yeah, we're not moving forward with model development at all until we have this ironed out with them.
So you mentioned that you had the plan that was finalized back in last fall or so. How is it moving forward? Is it
Well, we had the,
how you had
so
hoped?
we rolled out the plan, and then we put it out for comment to the larger stakeholder group, you included. And then before Hillary Arns departed, she kind of assembled the comments, and then we've been in a transition period, kind of pulling me into it. So we've stalled out a little bit on some of the work plan items. Nick has been able to carry forward his model selection document. He's worked through that since our November meeting. So that's the progress we've made there. Our beneficial use assessment, which was work element 3, they've incorporated Utah Lake into the current IR cycle. There's been some decisions, and that's been published in the last couple of days. So we're working through that. And then the load analysis and data compilation items, we haven't made all that much progress with those.
I know there's a project that, I don't know, I think it's mostly on BYU, but I'm not sure exactly where, but I know they've been monitoring on a continuous basis the nutrient coming in from some of the rivers coming in. I know the Provo River, the whole basin's being monitored. Is that connected into all of this?
are you talking about the CUP sponsored database? It went on for 5 years, and I think it finished up a year or 2 ago.
I think, or you could be referring to the IUTAH.
I don't know the
Well, it might be the IUTAH.
Yeah.
but I know it's still going on.
Yeah, I know of Greg Carling's group, Zach Androb, and a couple other folks have been deploying long-term SONs and then or other monitoring collection, water quality collection in the major drainages. I think Provo, they're focusing on Provo now, and they're looking to move a SON down closer to Utah Lake. And we actually just approached our water quality board at our last meeting 3 weeks ago and secured nearly close to $100,000 to increase that network by 3 stations. So we hope to be able to deploy 3 continuous monitoring SONs in the lake mostly with the focus of looking at a harmful algal bloom kind of warning system, partnering with the local health department to be able to give some, we're not sure we're going to be able to do it yet, but to help develop that data set to see if we can predict, when conditions might be favorable for harmful algal blooms so we can warn the public of that occurrence. So we've been working with the BYU folks and trying to bring them on board and integrate with their network.
I also know that the BYU Civil Engineering has done a lot of work with nutrients in Utah Lake, and they've been doing it for several years. So I know that they have a lot of data. Maybe that's what you're referring to.
No, this is ongoing right now. Who's doing it? They've got, my contact is one guy in biology, BYU, but I know they've got automated monitoring stations. They're monitoring phosphate, nitrogen, and pH. And I'm not quite sure what else, but in the river basin.
I'll try to find out.
Yeah.
So the agenda item is what research needs to be done. We've got research that's going on by Judy Sucker. DWQ's getting ready to ramp up. The Water Quality Council is doing their thing. Is there?
I don't think anybody knew about the U of U grant that is potentially coming through.
No one does know about that.
Right, exactly, yeah, exactly.
A little bit.
This has been a
The possibility of.
About what? But so like how, I guess the ultimate question is how can this group be of assistance to groups that already have a plan made out? What is our role here? Do you want us to? I don't know. I don't have the smarts to tell you what to do.
The questions that you have that are currently not funded, and thus you aren't pursuing these questions even though they're very relevant.
You say you have two areas that you're
there's
focusing
one
on. I'm
area
sure
that
that's not
has to do with
everything that you want to do.
Let me, there's two more areas. One would be what else we're doing, and it ties into what DWQ has done with the IR, or proposing with the IR. So let me address that one first. This is really controversial. They in the draft IR, they've listed Utah Lake, not only for the phosphorus now, but it's for the harmful algae blooms.
This is the integrated report. I'll send an email out with a link to that to everybody.
Yeah, that'd be an idea.
Comments are due by August 9th,
I think.
Yeah.
It just rolled out, was it Friday or Monday?
Just British, I think it came out Monday.
June 10th, that it opened for questions.
Yeah, I think it was Monday. But, I think what you guys need to be aware of, and this, I don't like to talk policy very much. In fact, I'm told not to.
Which means you like to.
Which means I can't help myself sometimes. But we battled over this thing about this bloom that happened in 2014 that didn't happen in 2015, for example, and so we're looking for it again this year. But DWQ, and I don't want to point fingers at Scott, and in fact Scott probably wasn't much of a part of this. I think it was higher levels of this, but. We all know about the dead dog thing, and that was the impetus behind it. And the report I wrote that I gave to you guys, wrote it as best I could, as objective as it could, the true conditions and the true likelihood of those dogs dying from an HAB or a cyanotoxin bloom. And so the bottom line is the one dog that did get necropsy had no evidence of ingestion. And what they normally do, and I got the literature quite deep and looked at a lot of, there's 3 papers that I found that had a true conformational link. In other words, there was the cyanobacteria that produced the toxin was in the lake. The toxin itself was in the lake. The cells and the toxin was in the mouth of the dog. The cells and the toxin was in the stomach of the dog. The toxin was in the blood of the dog, and in this case of microcystin, there were lesions in the liver of the dog. Okay, so this was the conformational step. I found 3 papers of this, that you can do this. And the vet who did that did those 3 things. There was no, the owner said, yeah, the dog threw up green stuff, but there would still have been residue of cells in the mouth and the stomach. That just has happened every time. At least it's in the literature anyway. So the point being is there was no evidence that that link occurred. Okay, so this is going to take me a couple minutes, so if you bear with me on this. The second dog did not get autopsied, but the vet that looked at that dog says, "Oh, I've seen this before. He died of cyanotoxin." So to me, that's a huge leap of somebody's incredible BPJ that that I think no, we need to have more science than that. So that's the story of the two dogs. Now, just there's one step of that I think I did fair justice also in my report, was that there is another cyanotoxin, and it's an anatoxin, it's a neurotoxin, and the one that we're concerned about is anatoxin AS. It's barely been described a couple of times by a couple of authors, and it used to be called Anabina, but it's Dolichospermum now, but it's Anabina flossacro was the genus or the species that it was called. That genus and species can produce not only hepatotoxins like microcystins, but it can also produce this neurotoxin. But there's not an assay for it. But that species was out in the lake, and it was in Linda Marina at about 70,000 cells per mil. Usually need about 100,000 cells per mil gets you to worry about a toxin being produced. So this was approaching that range. But a couple of things, just bigger things. The dog that died was not inside the marina. The cell counts of the Anabina outside the marina where the dog was swimming was in order of 2,000 or 3,000, way below what would have been known to produce enough toxin to kill the dog. There was a little bit of cell count, another 20,000 or so out in the middle of the lake on our way over to the Saratoga Springs Marina. So anyway, the long story short, if I can, there wasn't enough evidence, I think, scientific evidence to do this. And my biggest fear is this, is that this is on the list now, and this is a new thing, it's not just phosphorus, this is an HAB. And I can tell you guys hold near and dear that this lake is a recreational resource. So you want to take care of it, number one. Okay. Number two is my fear is that if this is listed for an HAB that may or may not be there, before we know that it is or isn't there, this puts a stigma on the lake. Oh my gosh, the lake's nasty. Oh, the lake's poisonous. Oh my, we're all going to die out there. So that's the fear I have, to saying before we have enough data, I'm not saying let's avoid it. We're out there every month now, and as summer comes along and fall comes along, we're going to be out there every other week. If the bloom begins, we're out there every week if the bloom begins to find out if this is happening. I'm also talking with Chemtech Ford. It's a really good analytical chemistry lab in southern, they're in Draper, and they really want to look at this anatoxin AS. They want to develop the assay for it. So I'm going to give them some seed money now in the next couple of weeks to do this. We haven't got any sample, of course, yet, but when we do, I'll have them online to do this. The point being is, we don't want to dodge the bullet by any sense. We want to know what it is, and if it's something that we need to be worried about, we won't worry about it. But until then, I'm going, let's not do the Chicken Little thing. The sky's not falling yet. And this is a great resource that we all appreciate. We fish out of it, we water skin it, we swim in it, and that kind of stuff. So, yes, it's a precautionary thing, but no, we don't want to get overly precautionary. So, my comments to GWQ will just be that. We only have anecdotal evidence, and only a tiny sliver of that we had a true problem with that during 2014, and in the future we just need to do better science, and that's all I'm asking for. So that's my pitch to you guys as you go back to your bosses and so forth, that I'm thinking that it could be there, the species was there, didn't look like there were enough numbers, or in the right location to cause the dog's death, or the water skier that died a couple weeks later, again, no information that links it. It just looks pretty peculiar, no doubt. But I'm not ready until we have an evidential line that says, okay, now we've got some science that follows this line of evidence, such as that proper way to do it in the crops, like that one vet did on the dog at Linda Marina. So, that's my pitch. And so we will, half of our effort literally will be this fall if that bloom develops again. We want to be on top of that. So. And that's where we're at, and also an assay. There is no assay for this anatoxin AS that could be there. We just don't know it. We just can't measure it yet. So we'll let you know, just, this is a big issue that we should all be aware of, and
So
if
this
it's
comment
happening, we should be
period
aware of it.
that ends in August, is that because of the listing, the new listing?
Well, it's so we issue the integrated report every 2 years based on the samples. So there's our evaluation of standards statewide. So the integrated report will include not only the Utah Lake assessment, but also every water body that we've assessed throughout the entire state.
And the comments should be directed toward what conclusions in the IR based on Utah Lake?
Whatever, you can comment on any part of it that you like. So if you got Utah Lake, you can comment on that issue, and I would sure suggest that you do.
And they would
And then they
respond to those comments?
Correct. They and EPA will respond to those, and EPA kind of says, okay, you responded appropriately or not. That's what I do nice with the state, I had a hell of a job, a lot like Scott's. But yeah, that's the process. So it is accountable. So this is the time, if we're worried about that, or whatever high level of a bar, whatever you want to hold or ask, whatever any questions you have on this, this is the time, the next 60 days is the time to prepare comments and get them in by August 9th or 10th, whatever that day is.
Will this be discussed with the board? Is it next
Talk
week?
about it next week. So, quick question, Scott. If I'm a city, who in my city is going to be most versed in commenting in an effective way that's helpful for guiding that document?
That's a tough question for me to answer. I don't know the roles that they all play, but
Is it the Mark Ogren of the city that runs
not the mayor.
manager? No. But we want our mayors to be able to go back to their city and say, know who to talk to say, hey, we need you to look at this and make sure that it makes sense and that we have good comments submitted. We don't want our mayors to dig into it and make a comment because it probably won't help.
Yeah, and I think it probably depends on the city and how they're set up. If they have municipal folks that are looking at water pollution or managing part of the parks or recreation, I would leave it to this group to disseminate that information.
Eric?
Yes.
I think there are probably two entities in most communities, depending upon their size and relationship to the lake, that are probably going to be most interested. One is clearly the wastewater treatment facilities that see the potential impact of regulations that may be the fallout of these documents. And two, those entities in the city that are interested in the recreational aspects, economic development aspects, perceptual aspects, the image aspects of the lake that they're enraged that would be impacted by what's in this document.
Parks and Rec departments, for example, might be.
Yeah.
I take it that the document we're talking about, this Utah Lake is impaired, at least that's what the newspaper's been reporting.
They've added an impairment to it.
Okay, they've added an impairment.
To recreation, I believe.
There's
It's
actually,
recreational.
I'll bring that up now.
Is that the blue-green algae or what?
Yeah, it's for the cyanobacteria with the risk to the recreating population.
I think everybody should, if they have time, take a look at the document and see what DWQ is doing and the quality of the work that they're doing to monitor water quality in the state. I mean, they're doing a very good job, I think. We have a few concerns about it, but just to know how DWQ operates, and this is your big report on the conditions of water in the whole state of Utah. You can see how they go about determining that.
Could you focus in on the Utah Lake portion of that IR?
Yeah. Before I send out the link, I'll tell you these are the page numbers where you tell it.
There'll be larger chapters that discuss the methodologies, the outcomes, and then you can get into the tables that show which water bodies are listed and the parameters. I personally haven't been through it yet. I mean, it's brand new to me even. And like that said, I've been I know that's going on and part of review and stuff, but in terms of the methodologies and things, I'm probably going to look through those. Two other issues with the IR that this group should be concerned with. Provo Bay is now going to be listed for ammonia, exceedances of ammonia criteria, and for pH criteria.
Interesting. I didn't see that part yet.
that in the IR?
That's in the IR, yeah. And then for the HAB listing, I'm not all that familiar with the data, and I hate speaking about other people's work, but from my understanding, the way that they construct that analysis is based off of our narrative criteria, and we've tapped into the World Health Organization guidelines for cell counts for cyanobacteria and compared those to the samples that we have collected. And it wasn't just from the 2014 event, it was from all of the last, our IR period includes a 12-year data record. So we go back 12 years and include that into the current assessment. So those cell counts or taxon counts are compared to all that data with the World Health Organization numbers that have been posted for, to guide safety and recreation.
Does the IR say how many samples were these decisions were based on?
I
should.
I'm not sure because if we, I'm just thinking if we post that kind of information as a 10,000 page document, but I'm not sure that it's in there.
Just be surprised if
the IR will tell you the minimum data requirements, so the number of samples and the sample frequency and the timing of the samples. That's all in the IR because we have to meet the minimum data criteria to be able to make a complete assessment.
That was some of the criticisms that were offered.
And some of the other parameters from the last one, they only had like 4 samples on some of the stuff.
And the phosphorus, like you mentioned, that's a carryover listing from back in the early 90s.
I was responsible for that, by the way. But I was forced to by if you remember Harry Judd.
That's what I was just going to say.
He overruled my judgment. Normally when I was doing those assessments, I did it for 10 years. When you have a narrative criteria, we just had a rule that to have a narrative like a phosphorus or what's the other narrative? Anyway.
The indicator value?
Yeah, the indicator value of, you always got a criteria. There's a couple others that have just the indicator values I'm trying to think of.
Well, nitrate has one.
Yeah, right. Okay, nitrate's a good one too. Anyway, the point being is, when you list for a narrative, that's a non-numeric, you say, well, I want to have some supporting evidence. So in all the other water bodies that I listed that included phosphorus as a cause or the source, I would have an accompanying violation of, for example, a DO standard in the bottom of a lake. So if the high plain of a lake went anoxic and half the water column, I think, was anoxic, like my rule, I go, okay, now I can link that back to a hypereutrophic condition that caused that low DO in the high plain, and that was loss of fish habitat. In the case of Utah Lake, it doesn't hardly ever stratify, and even then it's maybe a day or two, and that's probably what participates in the algae blooms. But because there was no DO, and there still isn't a DO link for an excess nutrient. So, and I made that point that says this is the first listing that Utah's done without having a link to a numeric standard that you can then work on and say, here's what we want the DO to be back to, or here's what we want this to be back to. So that would be the TMDL process. So we don't have right now, what do we want to bring phosphorus back to? We don't know. We don't, because even the algae bloom, we've got a productive fishery. We've got how many species of game fish? Most of them are introduced, but, so then that's that sort of thing. The second thing, too, about, what I was going to say about the WHO, the World Health Organization, I read the entire, 3 or 4 page document, 3,000 or 4,000 page document. There's so little data on cyanotoxin blooms and toxicity that they apply safety factors. So they have an interspecies safety factor, because in fact, the best data they have is from a mice feeding study. And so to go from species to species, and then to go from exposure to an environmental exposure, they add safety factors of 100 times 100. Okay, or maybe off. Anyway, the safety factor for cyanotoxins is 1,000. So when they say that the drinking water standard is 1, and this is nationwide, everybody wants to only have 1 microgram. It's because 1,000 micrograms was the lowest observable effect level in this mouse study. Didn't even kill them, just showed they had a little bit of a swollen liver and some lesions on the liver. Okay, so Again, but this is the best we've got. Like I'm saying, but if you have a number of, it's already got 1,000 safety factor, and you see a number of 1.4, look in the context of what that means as far as what the true exposure is. You know, that you'd have to drink 300 liters a day for 25 days of this stuff, you know, to get even to that level of exposure. So, again, you know, I don't want to downplay it that much, but it's just a matter of keeping the context that this is such a new field that we're all trying to get at this, but this is a ultra precautionary factor that we're doing right now. In fact, I tell you one thing on Great Salt Lake, my other favorite place to study is we've had 300,000 or 400,000 cell counts, well over the 100,000 cell counts we've had here. And the nodularin, which is another microcystin type toxin, is at 3, not even at 20. So you may get lots of cells and no toxin. And there's an occasional case where you get fewer than 100,000 cells, and you do get some toxins that are up at 10 or 15 or 20. So when you know, all this stuff is so new that, you know, the country would ever best really get after this, because yeah, they can be very toxic. I mean, it can be very hazardous, but we don't want to be overly, you know, the stigma on it. So yeah.
You mentioned we don't know where we want to get with phosphorus. So that begs the question, you know, is all this research solely for research sake, figure out where are we trying to go?
That's a really good question.
We trying to dodge
right
out of you know, spending some money to get the lake cleaned up, or what's
yeah.
Where are we going to get? Are we going to just continue to study until?
Yeah. Typically, you know, for this they would say we want chlorophyll A to be back to some level, and usually that level is, you know, say below 50, or, you know, I think 15 to 25 is somewhere mesotrophic to eutrophic borderline. The Utah Lake has naturally probably been there, and that's another thing. The number 2 I want to talk about is another study, but that would be the immediate goal is chlorophyll A, thinking that that's, you know, either linked to an HAB bloom and or to the food chain structure, that sort of thing, you know, but that's a general goal is somewhere less than 50, I'm going to say, you know, for chlorophyll A. And that's about it. Now with HABs, the goal would be, you know, this would add another tooth into the regulation, saying we want to get down to where we have low enough phosphorus so we don't have a dominant HAB bloom. Okay? So what that goal would be, again, that's going to be elusive for a while to see what is that. Because, for example, I just read a paper where you can have 10 micrograms, okay, 0.01 grams of phosphorus, and you can still have a cyanobacteria-dominated phytoplankton community. If there's still no nitrogen, at 10 micrograms phosphorus, you'll favor the nitrogen fixers. That's what these cyanobacteria can do. They fix on nitrogen. That's why they get going in Utah Lake. Utah Lake is nitrogen limited. Okay, so just because you reduce phosphorus is not guaranteed you're not going to have a cyanobacteria, at least dominance. The level of the bloom, yeah, probably reduced. But the dominance, no guarantees. So again, that's part of, I mean, this is a very active area of research right now, but those are exactly great questions to ask, because we don't know. I don't think anybody knows.
There's never going to be any guarantees. That's science, right? You can't.
That's right. Science, we strive to be perfect, but...
I just, you know, it just seems to me like it'd be nice to know what's good enough at this point, when, you know, as we're getting into all the research, what's good enough. You know, we invested, you know, and I say we, when I was in Mike's position, we did all the research on the carp population, and we took a leap of faith knowing that shallow lakes are driven by nutrients, bottom feeding fish, and lake level fluctuations. We had the authority to deal with the bottom feeding fish. And the research, it wasn't definitive, but it came out and said, yeah, you know, if you hit it hard, you can get on top of the carp population. And we did that kind of with the understanding that the other two prongs of the solution weren't being addressed. But if we could get on top of the cart, it was hopeful that those other two eventually would get addressed. And I understand what you're saying about the uncertainty and the lack of really understanding of how the lake operates.
Right.
But, you know, I just hate to see us get into a perpetual research situation that, you know, we don't see an end to and nobody, there's no resolution.
Well,
the way I'm looking at it is that to reduce phosphorus, it's going to take a lot of money from the citizens of the valley here, right, through the POTWs to implement into their treatment facilities, to refix their treatment facilities. Now, will that have a benefit or not on cleaning up Utah Lake is the question we want to know. Right? There's other sources of phosphorus. There's other things that are keeping the lake from being where we want it. So instead of spending that money right away, quickly, to clean up, to fix the treatment facilities, do a little bit of research, which is going to cost not 1/10 or 1/100th of what they're spending to build the facilities, to spend some money on research to get an idea if it's going to be effective or not at all. Right? That's why I'm saying.
I'm just wondering if we're going to get to that point of research.
We love research, of course. I mean, you make a great point. But, you know, our goal, and I'm reminded every month we have a monthly meeting, and my guys, you know, the people I work for, they are goal-oriented. I can't do this forever and say, oh, I have no problem, just throw another, $250 million at us and we're good to go again, So we, in fact, one thing we're introducing now is that, we're trying to mesocosm work. We're going to do nutrient addition, nutrient subtraction, when mesocosm's out here, we're going to get that lined up at least, maybe even this year, maybe this fall, I hope. So we're, trying to find out what potential endpoint there is. What if we take out phosphorus? What if we just add nitrogen? I joke, and maybe it's pretty accurate, that you want to solve this problem, don't take nitrogen out of your POTWs. Because if it's nitrogen limited, and that's what's causing these cyanobacteria. And all these cyanobacteria that are out here, they are nitrogen fixers. There's some that aren't nitrogen fixers, but the ones that cause these blooms, they are nitrogen fixers. So that tells us that, guess what, guys? We're favoring the bloom of these guys because we're losing our nitrogen. Where does most of that nitrogen go to? It goes into wetlands. In fact, I'm surprised. Provo Bay, I'm going to just make a hypothesis here. Provo Bay is probably an internal source of decomposition of the organic matter that's producing the ammonia. I don't think we have violated the ammonia standard in Mill Race, but I will find that out. I think the ammonia is largely gone by the time it's Provo Bay. Farmington Bay is the same way. You have a lot of nitrogen in the wetlands of Farmington Bay, the 100 wetlands, but it's all internally. In fact, I've got guys sleeping out overnight this week to do diol ammonia measurements. It's internally a source of internal ammonia. So these are the kind of questions that we want to ask. Is it nitrogen? Is it phosphorus? How much should we take out of one or the other or the other? So we are trying to be goal-oriented. The work that we do for the speciation of phosphorus, that's a huge, huge goal here. That we will see some answers in the next 2 to 3 years, So point well taken. Keep on us for that, because that's a legitimate point. Absolutely.
This has been a good discussion. It's gone on longer than I thought it would. We've generated some good topics. Obviously, we're going to want to stay very involved in the integrated report as it goes forward. There is a public hearing July 9th, I believe, up at your board meeting or boardroom.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah. That Eric will have those details going forward. But yeah, we do have a number of other agenda items, and this is the cutting edge of research for Utah Lake, and probably will be for the next 7 years, at least 2 years, dealing with water quality and point sources versus what's here naturally. So it's a topic that we'll revisit often.
Can I just add, it would be appropriate for the Utah Lake Commission Governing Board to offer a resolution if they feel it would help the process at all.
In response to the integrated report.
Support of or against it or whatever.
Also, like to be an effort public relations as well. You just don't get the National Enquirer review from taking her own concern.
Something true.
Okay.
Well, let's go ahead and move on to item 4E. That's you, Eric, reporting on the state grant, forestry, fire, and state lands, and the commission.
Okay, so as far as I know, there was a couple minor issues with the contracting. Most of those have been resolved. This last year, the legislative session was able to bump the funding so that it's good until June 30th, 2017. And most of our, like the Nature Center site analysis and site plan, that'll be done this year. AF Harbor is moving ahead with their expansion, or at least a portion of it, a good sized portion of it. Sandy Beach, we're waiting on the property to be deeded over from the Nature Conservancy to Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. And then there's state funding in place, and I'm not sure how, has the county secured it for sure yet?
We're doing the physical work, we're doing the impact
Okay,
work.
awesome. And so that project will move ahead here shortly. We're excited about that as soon as the fall, you think?
For the parking area and
Okay.
stuff like that.
So that'll be an awesome one that moves ahead in the near future. Saratoga Springs Marina, that's another one similar to the American Fork Boat Harbor. Expansion work being done down there at their marina with the state funding that was secured last year. Spanish Fork Trail Alignment Study, that one is being done, and that probably will be done this year. That'll help them go from I-15 out to Sandy Beach, which will align well. If they can get that built, that'll be a great way to take advantage of the new improvements that the county is completing down there.
Eric, do you have a group together that's helping with the Nature Center site analysis and site plan?
Yeah, so there's a subcommittee that's pulled some members from the technical committee, some members from the governing board, and then we also have some people that have experience with it that we've drawn from USU and a couple of.
Anybody from Orem on it?
Wait, yeah, Mark Seastrand is. And that's moving ahead. So we have a meeting next Monday that's going to finalize the criteria for how we select the site. And a couple weeks ago, we had a visioning meeting where everybody contributed. We had great turnout, and everybody talked about what they saw in that nature center and its multiple uses and so forth. It was a great project. It helped the architect helped her kind of envision what the building needs to encompass so that she can move ahead on doing the design work for that. Any questions on that? Water's Edge Development, you've seen the billboards. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, the county, and the commission as a whole is helping them work through the process of developing a beach area and a trail that goes along the front of that community that will be a public access point. We're excited about it. The county's helping with getting rid of some of the invasives down there. And Forestry, Fire, and State Lands are kind of helping us with helping them figure out the trail alignment and so forth to go along that water's edge. It'll be a nice development, and we're excited to have another beach access point that is available to the public. Provo dredging?
Yeah, it's going.
September 1st, is that still what we're shooting at?
That is the goal. Army Corps of Engineers permitting and federal Fish and Wildlife permitting is still ongoing, but the goal is still to do a late fall winter dredge and hopefully put it out for bid here in the next couple months and get actual good idea of costs. So we continue and we'll see how it goes in the upcoming months. Did I misquote anything?
No, I haven't seen the application.
You haven't
yet.
seen anything yet.
So
That's
yeah, just so everyone
reassuring.
knows that.
Does that mean it's not there, or that you just haven't seen it?
Yeah, haven't seen any sign of it. But I've talked with
JB.
Yeah, just kind of filling me in, keeping me in the loop a little bit. But they said an application would be forthcoming, but that was a couple of weeks ago at least. I haven't seen that. But.
Okay. You want to talk about Provo Beach master plan, Jason?
That's also ongoing. The biggest hurdle is going to be the wetland mitigation. We're going to have to overcome that hurdle before it's going to really move forward. The cost that's going to encumber on the project is substantial. We need to work out those details. Am I right, Eric? Am I misspeaking?
Fragmites credits.
Huh?
Fragmites removal credits.
There you go. So,
yeah, there's that, and there's also a big project up on the north end of the lake that will create some things that can help.
Got a lot of work done. So I get the impression Provo would still like to see it happen. We would still like to see it happen, but there's a lot more hurdles than I think any of us really expected. So we're still hacking through those as well. On a side note, keep in mind for anyone that has a marina or would like to see any development, recreational development around the lake, motorboat access grants are due in October, and they're overseen by State Parks and Recreation and Wildlife Resources. If you have questions, let me know. I'll point you to the right websites. So Saratoga Springs, American Fork County, if you're interested.
Can you tell us who you were chasing out there?
Those were 5 paddleboarders that are from California who wanted to paddleboard on the lake, and then 30-mile-an-hour winds kicked up, and little children. Luckily, the fishermen saw them. That was very nice of them to come tell us.
The wind is rather scary when you're on a paddleboard.
Being on a paddleboard is scary.
Paddleboard is not scary. So when the wind hits you and all of a sudden you're accelerating in the water without paddling.
Yeah. People are underestimating. Yesterday we had a 17-foot boat capsize and 4 people sat floating in the water for 20 minutes before we could go and get them. So even though we're not having large visitation, it's
still busy.
Still a few people that do come are making poor decisions.
Motorboat access grant, October?
Yeah, that's usually when we've done our pitches for the grants. I can't remember the exact dates, but like I said, if anyone's interested, let me know. I'll point you to the right website, and it's got all the details there.
Okay, Luke will turn the time over to you to talk about field trips, shorelines, and the festival.
Awesome. So the Utah Lake Commission hosted our annual spring field trips at Utah Lake. So a few years ago, we developed a curriculum that 4th grade teachers teach in the classroom during the year. And then they can bring the students to field trip days here at the park. So we did it 4 different days this spring. We had 1,300 kids overall come. And then we just rotated them through a number of stations. So the DWR helped with a few, and Living Planet Aquarium, Central Utah Water, and a few other organizations came and helped us run some activities with the kids. So, and yeah, Bill Lloyd donated some fish that we used to do some artwork with some paint on the fish and stamp. It was really fun. They were a hit.
Are these the 4th graders in all 3 districts in the county?
Yep. And it's growing to be really popular, so we extended it into the fall. Last fall we did 1 day over on the west side. This fall we're going to try to do 2 days on the west side as well. Because in the we host them here in the spring, and it's hard for the schools in Saratoga Springs and Mountain, farther parts of Lehigh to go all the way down here. So we're hosting some on the other side to make it easier for them. Hopefully we can just keep expanding it every year and get as many kids out to the lake as we can. So.
One of the carp flipped midday and it gave the kids quite a memorable experience.
All right, next thing is the Adopt a Shoreline program. This is the first year that we've officially had groups sign up to adopt access points. So far this year there's been one big activity done by LDS Earth Stewardship, which adopted Sandy Beach. So it was late April on a Saturday they did an activity. They had 29 volunteers and they picked up 41 bags of garbage in 1 day. Just a few hours. So they've committed to do 3 activities at Sandy Beach this year. So that should look good most of the year, hopefully. And then a group called Bow Fishing Girls is committed to help out at Inlet Park and some of the smaller access points along the west side as well. So it's a really fun program that we've been able to coordinate over the years. It's gaining momentum now, and hopefully over future years we'll have more and more organizations sign up. And ideally we can cover every access point around the lake, have a group in charge of it. get out there 3 times a year to pick up garbage and report any other trouble that they see. And the Utah Lake Festival was on June 4th. I think of the 3 years I've been involved, this was the most successful, I think. A couple new things we did this year. We extended it all the way out onto the middle jetty. So usually we just have all the booths right here south of the visitor center. But we put a few here and a few out there, and it gave a lot more space. It extended everything out, and it got people out towards the lake. And I think that helped people have a much better experience. And we had 4,000 people attend roughly, so it was a great turnout. And Mike or Eric, anything you guys want to add?
Expanding the format or the layout made a world of difference. Times in years past, it felt like a crowded shopping mall, and this year it was so much better to have more room. We filled the parking lot very early in the day, where we had people parking up Center Street, so we kind of reached capacity. So that 4,000 to 4,500 attendees is really the limit. You know, everybody talks about making it bigger and better and just wild and crazy, and there's some hurdles to doing that. Not that we would want to.
Time to start selling tickets.
Yeah.
Maybe it is.
We got rid of the free food.
Yeah, we got rid of free food. We've cut back on our advertising, but yeah, it's still a wild time. It's a lot of fun. And we have it really catered to families, so it's parents and kids under the age of 12 that go through the booths and just get a lot of information. And it's very intense, 4 hours. It's a lot of fun.
Should that be spread out to municipalities and the other boat harbors as well? That would be one way of expanding.
Yeah, it would probably fall back on those municipalities to provide the staffing and make it happen. The only way we pull this off staff-wise is using DWR and the dedicated hunter program. And we have upwards of 30 volunteers that are down here directing traffic and emptying trash cans and making traffic flow and making this all work. And if those were ever taken away from us, we wouldn't be doing the festival at all. So it can be a headache. And we talked about that early on, that maybe it's an event that people can go to different locations. We thought that would be by means of water, but your average attendee is not a boater at all. For most of them, this is the only time they come to Utah Lake, is to be part of the festival.
The boating option for them to take a boat ride or get on a paddleboard is hugely popular, probably because they aren't doing it very often.
I was just thinking, if you get municipalities to support it, then you could, each municipality take responsibility at their harbor.
Just have satellite festivals on the same day, but in different parts around the lake, maybe.
The 2 municipalities that could do it, American Fork and Saratoga Springs, are well aware that it's going on. Have not stepped up to volunteer that. I don't know if they've been approached, but it would be, when you expand an event like that, it takes some time to get established.
One of the things that we're doing to address this push to expand is that we keep the mission of it very simple, and it's an educational festival. It has booths that people come around and learn things about June Sucker and these other programs that we're doing on the lake. We've had numerous vendors and people like that contact us before the festival. Hey, can I have set up an additional type of venue? And we keep them back. One of the things that we can do is start having more big activities down here on the lake. In addition to the Utah Lake Festival, we're going to host a big paddle sports competition at the end of June or July on the 30th, for example, and we can have concerts down here. It's one of the things that we think about. Maybe we should have concerts down here. We have live music, but not really a full concert. Well, we can have that at a different event with a different intent and start getting use of the park without necessarily conflicting with our mission of this festival.
How is that event funded?
The June Sucker program is one of the partners. We provide funding to rent booths, make the park free for during the festival. It's amazing the truck of porta potties that comes in here to provide enough bathrooms for everybody. It's not cheap to provide all that. So that's probably the biggest financial contribution, and then the commission also contributes quite a bit towards prizes and making the event happen. And then altogether, we're probably looking at about $30,000 that we expend to make this festival happen for 4 hours on one Saturday in June.
See, one of the things I would think about Saratoga Springs Splash Day or whatever, almost nothing happens at the lake. It's all focused inland.
Maybe once they get their park, their Pelican Bay Marina expanded out, they can put more of a focus down towards the lake. That'll have to happen before June 30th of next year.
Okay. That brings us to the end of all of our items on the agenda that were specific. But are there any other comments, updates on various projects that people would like to provide?
This isn't a project, and I talked with Eric just briefly before this, and I've talked with the state. And I don't know who's involved with the governing board that meets next Thursday, but we've reached out to the state and asked them to do a presentation on their proposals for these nutrient studies and educate some of our, maybe our elected officials, so that they're in the know as to what's going on with the state, what's going on with Utah Lake, and in hopes that just an education. It hasn't been set in place yet. I talked briefly with Erica Gaddis at the state. She was on a regular meeting, but she has agreed to provide the staffing to do that presentation. But again, there's some coordination there and some scheduling, but tentatively we'd like to do that. We can talk about the narrative standard that's been released. It's an effort just to get those elected officials educated in what we're doing.
Erica presented at the last governing board meeting back in March on DWQ's work.
Oh, that's news to me, because when I talked to her, she admitted that the state had been a little laxed on informing and educating Utah County. So I'll talk in depth with her then.
I don't think a lot of the information that we're talking about now that's now available in this IRA was a focus of her attention for presentation.
The integrated report wasn't out yet.
Anyway, that meeting is definitely scheduled. Eric's got it on his calendar, and we'll see if we can add to that. Maybe get a few minutes from the state to present.
Okay. Is this for the governing board meeting actually?
Okay.
All right. Well, reminder that we are scheduled to meet on July 20th. Typically, we've canceled the July meeting, but with everything going on with water quality, the integrated report, it's going to be necessary to hold that meeting. So stay tuned. We'll let you know if it needs to be canceled. Dee, did you?
Mike, is there any information on the docks, private dock fishing from the state?
Not that I know of.
I was told that there was 5 out there that weren't supposed to be out there. But communities through forestry fire and Ben Renoff can apply and can put out docks. So the application goes through forestry fire and state lands, and they are permitting community docks.
Okay, good. Well, I assume there's a list of things you have to follow to do that.
Yeah. Where that list is, I don't know. After I'll give you Ben Starman's contact information, and you can reach out to him directly. He'll be able to answer that question.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no other items, we will entertain a motion to adjourn. All right. Let's go ahead and meet again in July.
Take that from
I do. Yeah, well, it's left all the activity.
No, she just left it. Dad got out of it, so. I clean up
The road,
Specify. For sure. And I don't know what a lot of it means, so I'll do my research and then print it. Right on here.
I like to do it, but this is trying to get to know the goal.
Yeah, for sure.
Let me know what we're talking about.
We've actually put breaking more than include the parking areas.
And yet still, I feel like maybe someday, maybe after a year or two, give a comment. All right, thanks, it was a great meeting. And I'll see you next week at the